The night my brother died, I didn't just lose family. I lost everything. With nothing but a cardboard box of memories and my old military watch, I found myself sleeping on a church bench at 67 years old, discarded by the very people who promised to care for me. But fate has a way of finding you when you've hit rock bottom. In a homeless shelter in Dayton, a blind young man named Mason taught me something that would change everything. Your past doesn't define you, Mr. V, but your next click might define your future. What happened next wasn't just about money. It was about resurrection, about how the worst betrayal can lead to the most unexpected redemption. And when my family finally saw what I'd become, their faces told a story worth $45 million. Follow this channel for more life-changing stories that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about family, loyalty, and second chances. Like and comment below telling us where you're watching from. And don't forget to share with someone who needs to hear that their story isn't over yet. The night my brother died, I didn't cry at the hospital. I waited until I got home, or rather to the house we'd shared for 30 years. It was the last piece of our childhood, our family, and my dignity. When I put the key in the lock, my niece Chelsea appeared in the doorway with a cardboard box and said, "His will doesn't mention you, Uncle. You're old enough to know you don't belong here anymore." Inside the box were my military watch, a torn Bible, and a picture frame with my mother's photo. She didn't even let me forget my cane. I slept that night on a church bench, with the smell of moldy carpet suffocating me and my feet frozen solid. I ended up at a community shelter in Dayton where nobody called me by my name, just Mr. V. That first night was one of absolute silence. I didn't speak to anyone. I just observed. And it was on one of those days, drinking cold coffee next to a visually impaired young man named Mason, that I first heard about something called crypto. At that moment, I just wanted to forget I existed. But what Mason told me that morning with a blind yet sincere smile changed everything. Your past doesn't define you, Mr. V, but your next click might define your future. I laughed. An old man like me, with a future? I didn't know, but I agreed to listen. It had been 3 weeks since Chelsea had thrown me out. 3 weeks of shelter cots and charity meals. 3 weeks of staring at the ceiling, wondering how 40 years of working in the steel mill, of paying taxes and voting in every election, had led to this, a 67-year-old man with arthritis and no home. I used to be somebody, I told Mason one afternoon as we shared a stale sandwich. My brother Thomas and I built that house with our own hands back in '83. We were gonna pass it down to the family. Mason nodded, his milky eyes staring just past my shoulder. Family's complicated, Mr. V. Blood don't always mean loyalty. I thought about that night again. Thomas's hospital room, the beeping machines, the smell of antiseptic. The doctor had called me out to the hallway, his face solemn. "He's gone, Mr. Vincent," he said. I remember standing there watching Chelsea through the window as she bent over her father's body, sobbing dramatically. The same Chelsea who, 2 hours later, would change the locks and hand me a cardboard box containing the remnants of my life. "He promised me," I whispered, more to myself than to Mason. "Thomas promised me I'd always have a home." Mason's fingers danced across his phone, a device he navigated better than most people with sight. "Promises die with people, Mr. V. But opportunity? That's immortal. Here, let me show you something." He slid closer, the faint electronic glow illuminating his face. "Bitcoin," he said. "Ethereum, blockchain, digital assets, the future of money." I scoffed. "Son, I can barely use an ATM. Besides, what would an old man like me do with internet money?" Mason's laugh was gentle but firm. "Mr. V, you know what's the biggest lie they tell old folks? That you're done. That your time for growth, for learning, for wealth, it's past. But see, the digital world doesn't care about your arthritis or your gray hair. It only cares about your decisions." I still remember the exact moment something shifted inside me. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was a tiny spark of defiance. I thought of Chelsea's husband Patrick, the financial advisor who always talked down to me at family gatherings. "You wouldn't understand investing, Uncle Vincent. It's complicated." The same Patrick who had convinced Thomas to change his will 3 months before his cancer diagnosis. "So how does it work?" I asked Mason, my voice barely a whisper in the cold shelter air. The next morning I stood in line at the public library. When my turn came, I looked the librarian straight in the eye. "Ma'am, I need to use one of those computers, and I need to learn how to click my way to a future." She smiled kindly, probably thinking I wanted to look up old friends on Facebook or watch videos of my grandchildren. But as I settled into the hard plastic chair and stared at the glowing screen, I had only one thought in my mind. I might have lost my home, but I wasn't going to lose myself. Not yet. Not like this. I didn't know then that those first hesitant clicks would eventually build a fortune worth $45 million. I didn't know my niece's face would one day drain of color when she saw what her discarded uncle had become. I didn't know that revenge, when served cold enough, could taste like redemption. All I knew was that I was tired of being nobodies. And for the first time since Thomas died, I felt something other than grief stirring in my chest. It felt like purpose. Mason taught me how to download a digital wallet app using the shelter's Wi-Fi. He couldn't see, but he handled his phone with an almost divine confidence. He gave me $100 in Bitcoin just to play around with, he said. I kept it like a sacred relic, not for the amount, but because it was the first gesture of genuine kindness I'd received in months. That first Bitcoin transaction changed something in me. I sat on my cot that night staring at the glowing numbers on the screen. $100. Not much to most people, but to me, a man who'd been reduced to the contents of a cardboard box, it felt like someone had handed me a key to a door I didn't even know existed. What am I supposed to do with this? I asked Mason the next morning as we stood in line for breakfast. Whatever you want, Mr. V, he said, tapping his white cane gently against the floor. That's the beauty of it. No bank telling you what you can do. No family member controlling your finances for your own good. Just you and your decisions. Nobody at the shelter knew, but I started studying. Late at night, in the corner of the public library, between finance books and tutorials spoken aloud. I took a free course, invested my Social Security savings in cheap crypto assets, and kept multiplying digital dust grains, all discreetly. Nobody in my family knew. They thought I was dead. You're becoming quite the regular, Mr. Vincent, Ms. Patel, the evening librarian, remarked one night as she found me hunched over a computer terminal, squinting at a YouTube tutorial on cryptocurrency trading. Just trying to keep my mind sharp, I replied, quickly minimizing the window. Old habits die hard. I'd spent my entire life being private about money matters. Well, we close in 15 minutes, she said, then hesitated. You know, we're offering a basic computer skills class for seniors every Tuesday morning. It's free. I nodded, though I was already well beyond basic skills. In the 6 weeks since Mason had introduced me to Bitcoin, I'd devoured every piece of information I could find. I'd set up multiple wallets. I'd learned about exchanges, about cold storage, about market volatility, and most importantly, I'd started to see patterns. Patterns that reminded me of the stock market Thomas and I used to discuss over Sunday coffee, back when we were still brothers in more than just blood. The cliff range began there. One afternoon, I spotted Chelsea at the supermarket. She pretended not to see me, but I saw her. I saw my mother's necklace around her neck, and I saw her husband, Patrick, laughing with her as they held a pamphlet. Investment consulting for seniors. Avoid crypto scams. That moment kept echoing in my mind. Would they ever know who I had become? I ducked behind a display of canned soup, my heart hammering against my ribs. It had been nearly 2 months since I'd seen any family member. Chelsea looked different somehow, her hair highlighted, her clothes more expensive. The same Chelsea who'd told me I was too old to understand modern finances was now holding a pamphlet warning seniors about cryptocurrency. The very thing I spent 12 hours a day studying. Patrick had his arm around her, his wedding ring catching the fluorescent light. The same Patrick who'd once told me at Thanksgiving dinner, "The problem with your generation, Vincent, is you don't understand how money works anymore." I watched them laugh together, standing in the express checkout line with a bottle of expensive champagne and a box of chocolates, celebrating something. Perhaps the finalization of Thomas's will, the successful eviction of an elderly uncle, the world continuing to spin exactly as they'd planned it. I clutched my generic brand pasta sauce and store-brand bread, suddenly aware of my thrift store clothes and scuffed shoes. But then I remembered the balance on my phone, the $3,200 I'd grown from Mason's original $100 through careful trades and research. Not life-changing money, but more than they thought I had. Would they ever know who I've become? The question formed in my mind like a whisper, then grew louder, not out of vanity or pride, but out of a quiet wonder at how quickly life could change. 2 months ago, I was sleeping on a church bench. Now I was studying financial charts until my eyes burned. That night, I made my first major investment decision. A new token was launching, high risk, but with potential for exponential growth. I moved half my holdings into it, my finger trembling slightly before confirming the transaction. "Why are you doing this?" Mason asked when I told him about it the next day. I thought about Chelsea and Patrick with their pamphlet, about the home I'd helped build, now forbidden to me, about the decades of memories locked behind a door whose locks had been changed. "Because," I said slowly, "for the first time in my life, I'm making decisions for me, not for family obligation, not for someone else's comfort, just for me." Mason nodded, his unseeing eyes somehow still full of understanding. "Just remember, Mr. V, this journey isn't about getting rich quick. It's about freedom. And sometimes, freedom comes with a high price tag." Little did I know how prophetic those words would become, or how soon I would have to decide what price I was willing to pay for mine. Over time, I began keeping offline copies of my digital wallet, hidden in flash drives and even inside the insole of my orthopedic shoe. The balance grew, but I wasn't spending it. I wanted this money to have purpose, redemption. 6 months had passed since that first night on the church bench. The shelter had become familiar. The cracked linoleum floors, the perpetually humming vending machine, the faded motivational posters on the walls. I'd grown accustomed to the rhythms. Breakfast at 7, library from 9 to 5, dinner at 6, then quiet hours where I'd review crypto charts on the phone Mason had helped me purchase. My portfolio had crossed $50,000. Not enough to buy back my old life, but enough to start a new one. Yet something held me back from renting an apartment or buying new clothes. Perhaps it was fear. Fear that the moment I stepped out of the shadows of poverty, my family would somehow sense it, like sharks detecting blood in water. Or perhaps it was something deeper, a sense that I was waiting. For what, I wasn't sure. That's when I met June. She wasn't like the other staff at the shelter, no patronizing smiles or clinical efficiency. She treated me like a person. She spoke to me as if my age was wisdom, not a burden. "Vietnam?" she asked one evening, nodding at my military watch. One of the few possessions Chelsea had allowed me to keep. "2 tours, I replied, surprised by her perception. Most people just saw an old man, not a veteran. "Medical Corps. I patched up boys younger than my grandson." She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "My father was in Vietnam, 101st Airborne. He still doesn't talk about it much." "Some things aren't meant for words," I said. And something passed between us, a recognition perhaps. Or maybe just a simple acknowledgement that we were two humans having a conversation, not a caretaker in a charity case. We started talking regularly. June worked 3 shifts a week at the shelter, always bringing homemade cookies or an extra coffee from the place down the street. She told me about her father's Parkinson's diagnosis, about the mounting medical bills, about how she worked 3 jobs but still couldn't keep up with the cost of his medications. "Sometimes I think the system is designed to break people like us," she confided one rainy Tuesday, her eyes tired but her voice still kind. "Working-class folks just trying to take care of our own." I nodded, thinking of Thomas, of our house, of the American dream we'd been promised if we just worked hard enough. Where had that dream gone? Into Patrick's investment portfolio? Into Chelsea's designer handbags? That night I made a decision. I converted $10,000 worth of crypto into cash. It took planning, a bus ride to a different town, a meeting with a crypto broker I'd connected with online, a careful withdrawal that wouldn't trigger bank reporting requirements. The next day, I placed an envelope in June's locker. No name, no note, just cash, enough to cover her father's medications for 6 months. When she found it, her hands trembled. She looked around the shelter, tears streaming down her face, asking if anyone knew where it had come from. I kept my face neutral, focused on my book. But inside, something warm bloomed in my chest, something I hadn't felt since before Thomas got sick. It was the first time I'd used my money to do good, and also the first secret I carried with pride. "Someone just left this," she kept saying, her voice breaking. "Who would do something like this?" A younger staff member shrugged. "Maybe an angel," he said, half joking. I almost smiled. Not an angel, just an old man who'd learned that wealth without purpose was just numbers on a screen. That evening I noticed Mason wasn't at dinner. When I asked about him, one of the staff said he'd been transferred to a shelter in the southern part of the state. Just like that. No goodbyes, no forwarding address. The impermanence of shelter life was a stark reminder of how fragile my current existence was. The next day, I went to the library and requested a book Mason had often mentioned, Digital Gold, A History of Bitcoin. When I opened it, a note fell out, written in the blocky letters of someone who can't see what they're writing. The value of a man isn't in what he has, but in what he knows to hide until the right moment. I traced the words with my fingertip, wondering if Mason had somehow known I would find this, or perhaps he'd left similar breadcrumbs for others like me. Lost souls searching for a new path forward. That night, lying on my shelter cot, I made another decision. I would no longer be passive in my wealth building. I would no longer just react to the market. I would study, plan, and execute with precision. And I would continue to use my growing resources to help others like June, people who had shown me kindness when my own blood had shown me the door. The irony wasn't lost on me. My family had discarded me because they saw no value in an aging man with modest savings. Now, as my crypto holdings approached 6 figures, I was invisible in a different way, hidden in plain sight, building an empire from the humblest of beginnings. The value of a man is in what he knows to hide until the right moment, I whispered to myself, clutching Mason's note like a talisman. The right moment would come, and when it did, I would be ready. 2 years passed. I was unrecognizable. Well-trimmed white beard, new clothes, and a firm posture that was gradually returning. A lawyer friend helped me set up a company in my name and convert part of my assets into a stable fund. Now I had documents, not just zeros on a screen. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. It came in small, deliberate steps, like the day I finally rented a modest 1-bedroom apartment 6 months after meeting June. Nothing fancy. Just a clean space with a real bed and a kitchen where I could cook my own meals. The landlord hadn't asked too many questions when I paid 6 months' rent up front in cash. I still visited the shelter twice a week, not as a resident, but as a volunteer. I'd serve meals, help with paperwork, listen to stories from men who reminded me of myself not so long ago. June was still there, now the assistant director of residential services. She never knew I was the anonymous donor who had helped with her father's medical bills, though I'd continued to find ways to support her through foundation grants and community fund awards that my lawyer friend helped arrange. My crypto portfolio had grown beyond anything I could have imagined. The $100 Mason had given me was now worth over $4 million. I'd diversified, learned about security, developed a strategy that balanced risk and growth. I studied the markets like a scholar, rising at 4 a.m. to check Asian market trends, staying up until midnight to watch European closings. I lived simply, though. My neighbors thought I was just another retiree on a fixed income. I drove a used Toyota, shopped at discount stores, and kept my wealth hidden like a second skin beneath my everyday life. The only luxury I allowed myself was a top-of-the-line computer setup, hidden away in what my neighbors thought was just a spare bedroom. And then, the invitation arrived. It came by text message, from a number I didn't recognize but instantly knew belonged to Chelsea. How she got my new number, I'll never know. Perhaps she'd been keeping tabs on me all along. Christmas dinner at Chelsea's house, the whole family will be there. Come if you want. The message landed like a stone in still water. I read it again and again, trying to decipher the subtext. Was it a peace offering? A trap? Simple curiosity about what had become of the uncle they'd discarded? Or was it provocation? I decided it was the latter. I would go. I chose my outfit carefully that Christmas Eve. Nothing too expensive that would raise questions, but nothing that screamed charity case either. A simple navy sweater, khaki pants, polished but modest shoes. I trimmed my beard with extra care, applied the cologne June had given me as a thank you gift for helping her organize the shelter's fundraising gala. As I drove to the address, the same suburban home where Chelsea and Patrick had lived for the past 5 years, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I was no longer the desperate old man sleeping on a church bench. I was Vincent Mercer, a man who had rebuilt himself from nothing, who carried a fortune in his pocket that nobody could see. The house was lit up with Christmas lights, cars parked along the driveway. I recognized Thomas's old Cadillac, now Patrick's I supposed, and several others belonging to cousins and in-laws. Music and laughter spilled from the windows. I sat in my car for a moment, collecting myself, remembering Mason's words about the right moment. When I rang the doorbell, a child I didn't recognize opened it. A little girl about 7 years old, with Chelsea's eyes and Patrick's chin. "Are you Santa?" she asked, staring at my white beard. I laughed genuinely for the first time that evening. "No, sweetheart, I'm your great-uncle Vincent." Her eyes widened. "Mom says we don't talk about Uncle Vincent." Before I could respond, Chelsea appeared behind her, face flushed from wine or embarrassment. Perhaps both. She froze when she saw me, her mouth forming a perfect O of surprise. "You actually came," she said, recovering quickly and plastering on a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You invited me," I replied simply. She ushered me in, whispering something to the little girl who ran off, presumably to tell the others that the family ghost had materialized on their doorstep. When I entered the living room, the conversation died. Eyes turned to me, some curious, some hostile, some simply confused. I recognized faces I hadn't seen in years. Thomas's fishing buddy who'd become like family, cousins who'd attended every Thanksgiving dinner since I could remember, Patrick's parents who had always treated me with cold politeness. And on the walls, I saw the gaps. Spaces where photos of me and Thomas had once hung, now replaced with professional family portraits of Chelsea, Patrick, and their children. It was as if they'd tried to erase any evidence of my existence. "Vincent," Patrick said, emerging from the kitchen with a forced smile. "What a surprise." I nodded. "Patrick," Chelsea jumped in, overly bright. "Can I get you a drink? We have eggnog, wine, beer." "Water is fine," I said, taking a seat in a corner armchair, observing the room like a scientist might study specimens under glass. The gathering awkwardly resumed its previous rhythm, though I could feel eyes darting to me periodically, whispers exchanged when people thought I wasn't looking. I sipped my water, answered polite questions about where I was living now, just a small place downtown, what I was doing these days, this and that, keeping busy, and how I'd been, never better. And then it happened. Patrick, probably trying to appear generous to the less fortunate relative, picked up my phone from the side table where I'd placed it. "Still using this old model, Vince? Let me show you what you're missing with the new ones." Before I could stop him, his thumb had brushed the screen, unlocking it with the simple swipe pattern I used, a concession to my arthritic fingers. The application that was open wasn't my contacts or weather app. It was my crypto wallet dashboard. The glow of the screen illuminated his face as his eyes widened, taking in the balance displayed in large, unmistakable numbers. "Is this real?" he whispered. The silence fell like an earthquake. The entire family huddled around the couch, the screen still open. Patrick was trembling. "How long have you been messing with this stuff, old man?" he asked. I simply said, "Since the night you told me I should look for a nursing home because I was a dead weight." Patrick's face drained of color as his own words echoed back to him. The night Thomas died. Those harsh words whispered in the hospital hallway while nurses cleared away machines and monitors. "We're not running a nursing home, Vincent. You're just dead weight now." I had carried those words like stones in my pocket for 2 years, feeling their weight every day. Chelsea stepped forward, her holiday sweater suddenly looking garish under the living room lights. "Dad, what is this?" The little girl who had opened the door, my great niece whom I'd never been allowed to know, peeked around her mother's legs, eyes wide with curiosity. "It's nothing, honey," Chelsea said, trying to usher the child away. "Adult stuff. Go play with your cousins." But Patrick couldn't tear his eyes from my phone screen. The number glowed accusingly. 40,276,831.42. "This is a mistake," he stammered. "Some kind of scam. These crypto things are all pump and dump schemes. You've been conned, Vincent." I smiled slightly. "Have I?" The room felt charged with a strange electricity. Relatives shifted uncomfortably, sensing something momentous unfolding, but not understanding what. Patrick's father, a retired bank manager who had always spoken to me like I was slightly slow, leaned forward with sudden interest. "Vincent," he said, "if you're involved in cryptocurrency investments, you need proper financial advice. These digital assets can be quite volatile, and at your age, at my age," I interrupted softly, "I have little to lose and everything to gain." I looked around the room at the faces of people who hadn't called or visited in 2 years, who hadn't wondered if I was alive or dead. When you have nothing, risk looks different. Chelsea tried to control the chaos. She plastered on a tight smile and said, "Uncle Vincent, this is dangerous. You're being manipulated. These internet scammers target vulnerable seniors." "Vulnerable," I repeated, tasting the word. Like being put out on the street the night your brother dies, that kind of vulnerable? A heavy silence fell over the room. Some looked away in shame, others in discomfort. A few, the younger cousins who'd had no part in my exile, looked confused, piecing together a family history they'd never been told. But then came the second blow. I pulled from my pocket a registered letter with the city seal. The building where they had recently opened their investment office was in my name. It had been auctioned and purchased by me. I hadn't planned to reveal this tonight. It was one of several properties I'd quietly acquired through the LLC my lawyer had established. Investments for the future, tangible assets to balance my digital portfolio. This particular building, a renovated warehouse in the trendy part of downtown, had been a calculated purchase. I knew Patrick had just signed a 5-year lease for the second floor, where he'd opened a financial advisory firm specializing in retirement solutions. Chelsea snatched the letter from my hands, eyes scanning the legal language. "This can't be right," she muttered. "This has to be a mistake." "No mistake," I said calmly. "Blue Harbor Properties LLC is mine. I acquired the building last month." Patrick's face, already pale, now took on a grayish tinge. "That's our office building," he said hoarsely. "We just spent $80,000 on renovations. The lease stands," I assured him. "I'm not in the business of breaking contracts. I'm just your landlord now." "Why?" Chelsea asked, the letter trembling in her hands. "Why would you do this?" The room held its breath. This was the moment I'd played out in my mind countless times over the past 2 years. The moment of revelation, of vindication. I had imagined myself thundering with righteous anger, listing every slight, every betrayal, every night I'd spent homeless while they lived in comfort. Instead, I found myself answering with a whisper, because I learned that power isn't in shouting, but in waiting. Something shifted in Chelsea's eyes then, a flicker of recognition perhaps, or fear. She looked at me as if seeing me for the first time, not as Uncle Vincent the burden, but as a man who had survived, adapted, evolved. "You could have said something," she said finally. "You could have told us you were doing well." I glanced at the empty spaces on the wall where family photos had once hung. "Would you have answered if I called?" No one spoke. The Christmas tree lights blinked in the corner, casting alternating shadows across shocked faces. Someone's phone chimed with a message, jarringly cheerful in the tense silence. Finally, Patrick cleared his throat. "So what happens now? Are you going to evict us? Triple the rent? Is this about revenge?" I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 69 years in my joints, but holding myself straight. I took my phone back from Patrick's limp hand and slipped it into my pocket along with the letter Chelsea returned to me. "What happens now," I said, "is entirely up to you. I'm still the same man I was 2 years ago, just with different numbers in my accounts. The question is, are you the same people who put an old man out with nothing but a cardboard box? Or have you perhaps evolved as well?" I walked to the door, passing the Christmas tree with its pile of brightly wrapped presents. I paused at a small ornament hanging at eye level, a faded homemade thing, a popsicle stick frame around a photo of Thomas and me as boys, fishing at the lake. It was the only evidence in the house that I had ever existed in this family. "Merry Christmas," I said, and stepped out into the cold December night, leaving behind a silence heavier than any words could have been. In the days that followed, they tried to convince me to divide the assets. They said it was fair, that I owed it to the family. But I remembered the cold coffee at the church, the cardboard box on the sidewalk, and Mason's hand guiding me through the digital darkness. The morning after Christmas, my phone began ringing. First Chelsea, then Patrick, then cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. I let the calls go to voicemail, listening to their messages later with a detached curiosity. They all struck the same tone: concern for my financial well-being, offers to help manage my unexpected wealth, suggestions for family investment opportunities. Patrick's message was particularly transparent. "Vincent, we need to talk about your situation. These crypto investments are extremely volatile. I can help you convert to more stable assets, set up a proper retirement fund. Call me back. This is serious." I sat at my kitchen table, watching snow fall outside my apartment window, and felt a strange peace. For 2 years, I had lived with the ache of family betrayal, the hollow silence of being forgotten. Now suddenly I was remembered, not as a person, but as a resource to be managed, an opportunity to be seized. On New Year's Eve, Chelsea appeared at my apartment door. She looked different than she had at Christmas. No designer clothes or carefully applied makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her eyes puffy from what might have been tears. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside, gesturing to my modest living room with its secondhand furniture and bare walls. I hadn't bothered decorating much. Old habits of transience die hard. She sat perched on the edge of my couch, eyes taking in the sparse surroundings with what seemed like genuine surprise. "You live here? With all that money? What would you have me do with it?" I asked, settling into my reading chair across from her. "Buy a mansion, a sports car? I'm almost 70, Chelsea." She flinched slightly at my direct tone. "I just meant you could be more comfortable." "I am comfortable," I said. "More so than when I was sleeping on a cot at the Dayton Community Shelter." The words hung between us, heavy with accusation. Chelsea stared at her hands, twisting her wedding ring. "We didn't know you ended up in a shelter," she whispered. "We thought you'd go to one of your friends or maybe to Cousin Robert's. Did you check? Did you call to make sure I had somewhere to go?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. "Why are you here, Chelsea?" I asked finally. She took a deep breath. "Patrick wants me to convince you to let him manage your crypto investments. He says they're not secure, that you need professional help." I couldn't help but laugh. A short, sharp sound without humor. The same Patrick who told me I wouldn't understand investing because it was too complicated for someone my age. He was wrong, she said quickly. We were all wrong. About so many things. She leaned forward, eyes suddenly earnest. "But family is family, Uncle Vincent. We're blood. Doesn't that count for something?" I thought of Thomas then, my brother who had promised me a home for life, who had then changed his will when his cancer diagnosis came. Had Chelsea and Patrick influenced that decision? I would never know for certain. Thomas had been confused toward the end, the pain medications clouding his mind. "Blood," I said slowly, "didn't seem to count for much when I was put out with a cardboard box." Chelsea flinched again. We were emotional. Dad had just died. We weren't thinking clearly. "And now that you know I have money, you're thinking clearly." She had the grace to look ashamed. "It's not just about the money. It's about family legacy. What Dad would have wanted." I stood up and walked to the window, watching the snow continue to fall and the streetlights glow. "What Thomas wanted," I said quietly, "was for me to have a home until I died. He promised me that, Chelsea. The night before he went into the hospital for the last time, he held my hand and promised." When I turned back to her, there were tears in her eyes. Real ones, I thought, not the calculated emotion she'd displayed at Christmas. "I didn't know," she whispered. "There's a lot you don't know," I replied. I returned to the shelter only once after that conversation. I saw June outside, tired, with deep circles under her eyes. I went to her, no longer as a rejected old man, but as someone who could offer dignity. She recognized me and cried. She had been working double shifts all week. Her father's condition had worsened, requiring more expensive treatments not covered by insurance. The shelter was understaffed, overwhelmed by an influx of new residents displaced by winter evictions. "Sometimes I think nothing we do matters," she confessed as we sat in her small office, steam rising from the coffee cups between us. "We help one person and 10 more come through the door the next day." I thought of my growing fortune, of the digital assets accumulating in wallets and exchanges. What was the purpose of wealth if not to ease suffering? What was the point of my second chance if I used it only for vindication? "What if you could do more?" I asked. "What if resources weren't the limitation?" She smiled tiredly. "Then we'd change the world, one life at a time." That night, I made my decision. I would not leave anything to those who had discarded me. The majority of my fund was directed to a project for assisted living housing. The name of the project? Blind Trust, in honor of the blind young man who taught me to see. I contacted my lawyer the next morning. We spent weeks setting up the proper legal structures, a foundation, a board of directors, with June as the executive director, funding mechanisms that would ensure sustainability beyond any market fluctuations. When I finally signed the papers transferring a significant portion of my crypto holdings to the newly established Blind Trust Foundation, I felt lighter than I had in years. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about redemption, not just for me, but perhaps in some small way for a system that had failed so many like me. Are you sure about this? My lawyer asked as I signed the final document. Your family might contest it after you're gone. I thought of Chelsea's tears, of Patrick's transparent greed, of the little great niece I would never really know. Let them try, I said, signing my name with a flourish. Some trusts, like some men, are designed to withstand challenges. At the beginning of the following year, Patrick called me in panic. The rent would triple. The building's real estate fund would change direction. He begged me to intervene. I simply said, "Talk to the new manager," and hung up. The call came on a Tuesday morning in early February. A cold, gray day with snow piled along the sidewalks and salt staining the roads. I was at my kitchen table reviewing the latest blockchain developments on my laptop when my phone lit up with Patrick's name. I almost didn't answer. In the weeks since the Christmas revelation, the calls from family members had gradually dwindled as they realized I wasn't going to be an easy mark. But something, curiosity perhaps, made me pick up. "Vincent?" Patrick's voice sounded strained, higher than usual. "We need to talk, it's urgent." I said nothing, just waited. We got a letter from the property management company for the office building. Blue Harbor Properties is being acquired by some foundation. The new owners are planning to reassess all lease agreements and adjust rental rates to reflect current market value. I could hear him shuffling papers nervously. "That means triple the rent, Vincent. Triple? We can't afford that. The business is just getting established." I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring the bitter warmth. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said finally. "Sorry? That's it? Vincent, this is your building. You can stop this." His voice cracked slightly. "We put everything into this office. Our savings, a second mortgage on the house. If we lose this space or have to pay triple rent, we're ruined." The irony wasn't lost on me. Ruined, cast out, left to fend for themselves, just as I had been. But revenge, I was learning, was a hollow pursuit. It filled nothing, healed nothing. What would Thomas have wanted? My brother, for all his flaws and final betrayal, had believed in second chances. "I've sold my interest in Blue Harbor Properties," I said truthfully. The transfer to the Blind Trust Foundation had been completed the previous week. "What? To whom?" "You have to tell them to honor our original agreement." "I don't have to do anything, Patrick," I said quietly. "Talk to the new manager, that's all I can tell you. This is about Christmas, isn't it? About showing us you have power now?" His voice had turned ugly, desperate. "You're punishing us." I closed my eyes, suddenly tired. "Not everything is about you, Patrick, or about the past." "Then what is it about? Help me understand, Vincent." For a moment I considered telling him everything. About the shelter, about Mason and June, about the Blind Trust Foundation, and its mission to create affordable housing for seniors and disabled individuals. About how a portion of all commercial rent from the properties would fund medical care for those who couldn't afford it. But some things weren't meant to be explained. Some journeys couldn't be compressed into a phone conversation. "It's about the future," I said simply, and ended the call. Later that day, I met with June for our weekly coffee. She was practically glowing, energized by the progress of the Foundation's first project, a 40-unit complex specifically designed for seniors with limited mobility and their caregivers. "The architects submitted the final plans yesterday," she said, spreading blueprints across the cafe table. "Look at this. Community gardens, a health clinic on site, shared spaces for reducing isolation. It's everything we talked about and more." I nodded, studying the detailed drawings. "And the commercial properties?" "All transferring smoothly," she assured me. "We're honoring existing leases, of course, but adjusting rates for new tenants and renewals. The income will help make the residential side sustainable." She hesitated. "There was one tenant who called. Seemed pretty upset about the changes. A financial advisory firm downtown?" I kept my expression neutral. "Did they speak with the property manager?" "Yes," she explained our new rent structure and the Foundation's mission. Offered them some options, downsizing to a smaller office in the building at their current rate or maintaining their space at the adjusted rate. June sipped her latte. "They weren't happy, but at least they know where things stand." I nodded, a weight lifting from my shoulders. This was justice, not revenge, creating something good from what had once been pain. The building that housed Patrick's business would now help support the very people his industry often overlooked. Seniors with limited means, people like I had been. Days later, Chelsea appeared at the shelter where I still volunteered twice a week. She wanted to know who was the new owner of the building, who had made the final decisions. They handed her a folder with the entity's name, Mason and June Fund. She left in silence. She arrived just as I was finishing my shift, helping sort donated winter clothes in the back room. I heard her voice at the front desk, asking for information about a foundation. When I peered through the doorway, I saw her standing there in an expensive wool coat, looking out of place among the shelter's worn furniture and bulletin boards covered with resource flyers. "I'm trying to reach someone from the Mason and June Fund," she was saying to the receptionist. "They recently acquired a property management company called Blue Harbor." The receptionist looked confused. "I'm not sure we have that information, ma'am, but we do receive some funding from them for our senior programs. Would you like to speak with our director?" I stepped back into the shadows as June emerged from her office to greet Chelsea. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I watched as June handed Chelsea a folder with the foundation's information. I saw Chelsea's face change as she opened it. First confusion, then a dawning recognition as she saw the mission statement and list of founding principles. My name wasn't anywhere in the documents. I had insisted on anonymity, but something in the language, in the purpose, must have spoken to her. She left without seeing me, walking slowly to her car with the folder clutched against her chest. I never learned exactly what June told her, but I knew it was enough. Enough for Chelsea to understand that what had happened wasn't about punishment, but transformation. I never saw Chelsea again after that day. I heard through the local grapevine that she and Patrick moved out of state, that they'd sold their house and started over somewhere on the West Coast. Patrick's financial advisory firm declared bankruptcy. Chelsea, I was told, had gone back to school to study social work. Perhaps they had found their own path to redemption. I hoped so. Today I write these words sitting on a park bench with my wool coat and a warm coffee in my hands. Nobody here knows who I am, and perhaps that's better this way. The autumn leaves drift lazily down around me, painting the path with splashes of crimson and gold. The park is quiet this morning. Just a few joggers, a young mother pushing a stroller, an elderly couple walking hand in hand along the winding trail. None of them give me a second glance. To them, I'm just another old man enjoying the crisp October air, perhaps waiting for grandchildren who never arrive. If they only knew the journey hidden behind these weathered hands and tired eyes. If they could see the invisible ledger of losses and gains that had brought me to this peaceful moment. 5 years have passed since that Christmas night, when my family discovered my secret. 5 years since I stepped out of the shadows of poverty and into a different kind of invisibility, the peculiar anonymity that comes with purpose rather than desperation. The Blind Trust Foundation now operates in 3 states, with 12 residential communities providing dignified, affordable housing to seniors and disabled individuals who might otherwise fall through society's cracks. June still serves as executive director, though she's assembled a talented team around her. Her father passed away last year, peacefully with excellent care surrounded by family. At his memorial service, June spoke of angels who appear when least expected, and though she never looked my way, I felt her words settle around my shoulders like a mantle. I never found Mason again, despite hiring a private investigator to track him down. The trail went cold at that southern Ohio shelter where he'd supposedly been transferred. Sometimes I wonder if he was real at all, or if he was some kind of guardian sent to guide me when I was at my lowest. It sounds foolish, I know, a rational man like me entertaining such fanciful notions. But then again, what is more improbable? A blind, homeless man teaching a discarded senior about cryptocurrency, or the cosmic convergence of 2 souls exactly when they needed each other most? I keep a small apartment downtown now, nothing extravagant, but comfortable. Books line the walls, mostly on subjects I never had time to study during my working years. Philosophy, astronomy, world religions, art history. I audit classes at the local university sometimes, sitting among students young enough to be my grandchildren, absorbing knowledge for its own sake. My crypto wallet has grown beyond anything I could have imagined that first day in the library. 45 million at last check. But the numbers matter less to me now. What matters is what the wealth enables. The foundation's work, the scholarships I've established anonymously at the community college, the medical research I fund in Thomas's name. I heard through the grapevine that Chelsea divorced Patrick 2 years ago. She teaches social work now at a university in Oregon. I send anonymous donations to her department's research fund each year, my way of acknowledging that perhaps, in her own way, She too has found redemption. Her daughter, my great-niece whose name I finally learned is Lily, would be 12 now. Sometimes I wonder if she remembers the old man with the white beard who appeared at Christmas dinner long ago. Patrick, I'm told, works at a big box store in California. Started over completely. I don't wish him ill. I've learned that bitterness is a poison you drink yourself, hoping others will feel its effects. The house Thomas and I built together was sold years ago, its contents auctioned, its memories scattered to the winds. I drove by it once just to see. A young family lives there now, children's bicycles scattered across the lawn we once mowed with such care. Life goes on. The world turns. My story isn't about revenge. It's about resurrection. About how the worst words can push someone toward the best destination, if they have the courage to walk in silence. The last time I opened my digital wallet, I saw the balance $45 million. But you know what made me cry? It was Mason's final message, which I found in an automatic backup. What you plant in darkness, one day becomes sunshine on someone's face. That's what I did, and that's what defines me now. Not the betrayal, but what I built from its ashes. Not the rejection, but the welcome I created for others. Not the family that discarded me, but the community I helped nurture in its place. As I sit on this park bench watching children chase squirrels and couples walk hand in hand, I feel a peculiar peace. My life didn't turn out as I expected. It turned out better. The pain that once felt like an ending became a beginning instead. Sometimes I think about that first night on the church bench, the moldy carpet smell, my frozen feet, the absolute certainty that my life was over. If I could go back and whisper in that broken man's ear, what would I say? Perhaps just this: the darkness doesn't last. Keep walking. Your greatest contribution lies ahead. I don't know how many years I have left. At 74, with arthritis creeping further into my joints each winter, I'm under no illusions about mortality. But I'm no longer afraid of being forgotten. The buildings will stand. The foundation will continue. The lives touched will touch others in turn. Ripples expanding outward long after the stone that created them has sunk to the bottom. My daughter once said I was too stupid to understand crypto when I asked about Bitcoin. Then her face went white when she saw my wallet worth $45 million. But the real wealth wasn't in the digits on the screen. It was in what those digits allowed me to become. Not a victim, but a builder. Not discarded, but essential. Not defined by loss, but by possibility. So if there's a moral to my story, perhaps it's this: never underestimate those you discard. The seeds scattered in darkness may one day grow into forests that change the landscape entirely. And the kindness shown to a stranger, like Mason's simple gift to a homeless old man, may be the spark that ignites a transformation greater than you could imagine. Now I think I'll finish my coffee, feed these persistent squirrels the rest of my muffin, and walk slowly home. There's work to be done, lessons to learn, life to live, quietly, purposefully, gratefully, and that, my friends, is enough. As Vincent's story comes to a close, I find myself wondering, what would you do if you were suddenly stripped of everything? Your home, your dignity, your place in a family you helped build. Would you choose bitterness, or like Vincent, would you find the courage to plant seeds in darkness that might one day become sunshine on someone's face? The true wealth in this story wasn't measured in millions. It was found in the profound truth that our lowest moments can become our greatest beginnings. Vincent's journey reminds us that redemption isn't about getting even. It's about rising above, about transforming pain into purpose. The family that discarded him never imagined he would build something greater than what they took away. Perhaps that's the most powerful legacy any of us can leave. Not the wealth we accumulate, but the lives we touch when we refuse to be defined by rejection. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear that their story isn't over yet. Sometimes the most important words we can hear are simply these: the darkness doesn't last. Keep walking. Your greatest contribution lies ahead. Thank you for listening, and remember, what you're going through today may be preparing you for a purpose greater than you can imagine.